Diving into what I saw in Chris Braswell, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Tuesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, at @JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, and one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Giving a few predictions for the schedule release on Wednesday, but we're finally diving into my film study on Chris Braswell, the Bucs' second-round selection. I've been promising this for a few days. Things kept coming up. Antoine Winfield Jr. decided to go ahead and become the highest-paid defensive back in the NFL and get more guaranteed money than any safety has in the history of football. So it got pushed to today. But much like my Graham Barton study, I took a look at Pro Football Focus's game grades, and I wanted to take his best graded game and his worst graded game, and then just another game somewhere in between. So his best graded game was the regular season finale against Auburn in the Iron Bowl, where he got a 90.8. His lowest graded game was in the college football playoff against Michigan with a 57.6. And then I watched the SEC championship against Georgia, where he was graded a 66.0. So for starters, I don't understand how the Auburn game was the highest graded one. I'm not sure what they're basing grades on, but I'm going to talk about some of the things that jumped out to me in each of those games, both good and bad. So let's start everything off with the good of what I saw. Against Auburn, there were two key moments that jumped out, and it was in pivotal plays late in the game. Midway through the fourth quarter, just over 7 minutes left, Auburn was facing a 3rd and 9 around their own 35-yard line. Braswell was lined up opposite of the right tackle and beat him clean around the edge with a solid power rush, sacked the quarterback for a loss of 5, and at the time, Auburn was ahead 24-20. So this was an absolutely huge moment. Auburn was looking for a key first down that would have gotten them near midfield, been able to chew even more time off of the clock. Instead, Braswell, with easily his best play of the game in that moment, able to get the sack, force Auburn to punt, and then Alabama would go on to take the lead in that game with one of the most incredible plays I have ever seen. But after Alabama took the lead late in the game, Auburn had 1st and 10 from their own 15, and they had to get about 50 yards in 26 seconds to get in field goal range and try to tie the game up at 27 apiece. Braswell got past the right tackle with basically just a stutter step move like you would see in basketball, got into the backfield, gets another sack, a forced fumble, which was nearly resulted in a safety. An Auburn lineman was able to get back out to the 1-yard line, but two clutch plays by Braswell late in the game, and one that's among the most important games to that school. I mean, you talk about the Iron Bowl. That's like Ohio State, Michigan. That is like Red Sox, Yankees. It's one of the biggest games in all of sports. North Carolina, Duke. It's a massive, massive game. So to have those moments that late in that specific game was huge for Braswell. But let's talk about some of the good against Michigan in the college football playoff. Only really one thing jumped out. I'm going to talk more about this game in a little bit, but the very first snap that Braswell took was a 3rd and 8 on the opening drive for Michigan. And while he didn't record a tackle on the play, he did drive the right tackle all the way back into J.J. McCarthy's lap, disrupted the play, forced an incompletion. Michigan would have to punt on the next play. Then flipping over to the SEC championship against Georgia, some things that stood out. You had a play in the second quarter. Georgia had it 1st and 10. Braswell came in on a little bit of a delay, which let him get to the quarterback untouched, caused an errant throw, and it was nearly intercepted by Kool-Aid McKinstry. Then in the third quarter, with the Bulldogs facing a 3rd and 7, Braswell came in. He shed 2 blocks to get to the quarterback and absolutely blasted him right as he was releasing the football, caused, again, a little bit of an errant throw, fell harmlessly incomplete to the turf. But overall, as far as the good was concerned, Braswell had some limited opportunities. And that was something we talked about on draft night or over draft weekend. But in the first half of these games, he was typically on the field for 3rd downs and obvious passing situations. In the second half of these games, he was on the field much more, intended to be really out there for just the entire defensive drive. Quite a few times, he would drop into coverage to cover a running back or a tight end, mostly in zone defense when he was over covering the flat. And he does a pretty solid job in those situations. His situational awareness was really impressive. And you can see how a lot of times he would actually try to garner attention and almost act as a decoy, free things up for the interior pass rush or, his partner in crime there, Dallas Turner. The other thing that really jumped out that I really liked is how versatile Chris Braswell is. So he didn't just line up on one side of the field. He would line up as the stand-up edge guy against the right or the left tackle. He would put his hand in the dirt as a 4-3 or a 3-4 defensive end. He really bounced all over the field to try and be put in favorable matchups. Or, as I mentioned, there were times he would really try to draw attention away from one side of the field so that Dallas Turner would have those opportunities one-on-one. There would be a blitzing corner. Maybe a safety would sneak up into the box and come on a delayed blitz. But, you have Turner running all kinds of stunts and getting to the quarterback. And Chris Braswell did a really, really good job of actually drawing attention to himself away from Dallas Turner, away from some of these favorable matchups that the Alabama defense was in order to create pressure on the quarterback. This is really crucial to his ability to play in Todd Bowles' defense. I'll talk more about how he's likely going to be used coming up a little bit later, but Bowles is going to ask a lot of him, and I saw his ability to do a lot of those things throughout these games. Bouncing out into the flat to be in coverage, moving sides of the field, lining up over the center, putting his hand in the dirt as a down lineman. These are all things Braswell can do and will be asked to do. He also seems to get better as the game goes on, and he missed out on some reps because of the role that he played and the fact that he was behind guys like Dallas Turner, who never really came off the field. But it seemed he would get a better feel for the game as it progressed, as he wasn't just rotated in strictly as a pass rush specialist. And that's where he would really start to elevate his game and start to shine. And then, of course, having a nose for key plays in big situations, in close games. You can't teach something like that, and you love to see something like that out of Chris Braswell. Other than the Michigan game, it usually took a drive or two before you really noticed Braswell, but once you did, more often than not, you really just continued to notice him moving forward. It wasn't all great, though. Some of the bad and how the Bucs can best use him, that's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even easier and faster. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. You better believe I'm keeping an eye on the Celtics series and trying to plan a surprise trip for my son to see them in action against the Indiana Pacers if the Pacers can get past the Knicks. And those last-minute deals from Game Time are the best way to make sure that we get in to see his favorite team. With Game Time's last-minute deals, I can save up to 60% off for those playoff seats. Now, once I find where we'll be sitting, being able to use Apple Pay and have those tickets in just 2 clicks makes the process about as easy as it can get. No surprises either. With all-in pricing, I know exactly what I'll spend when I'm looking for where we're going to sit. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I should be with Evan Klosky tomorrow to talk about the Antoine Winfield Jr. deal. I'll get some of his predictions on the schedule. In the meantime, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There was definitely some bad mixed in while I was watching Braswell, or at least less impressive. All right, I'm going to go back to the Auburn game where he got that 90.8 grade, and again, I don't understand why. He was non-existent in the first half. In fact, through 3 quarters, he had 1 tackle, no pressures, was largely a non-factor. I was a little frustrated watching that game because I know you can win a rep without notching anything in your stat line, but he wasn't even doing that. He was really just getting removed completely from the game. He was having trouble shedding blocks. He was slow to react in the run game, something else that I'm going to talk about a little bit more coming up in a little bit. He wasn't terrible, but I expected a much more impressive performance from his quote-unquote highest graded game. Honestly, I thought he was better against Michigan than he was against Auburn, and Michigan was his lowest graded game. He didn't have the 2 huge plays with the game on the line like he did in the Iron Bowl when he went up against Michigan, but he was so much better at shedding blocks and getting past that initial contact to try to get into the backfield. The problem for Braswell against Michigan is that McCarthy had a lot of designed bootlegs and rollouts away from Braswell's side of the field, and it really limited his opportunities to make plays. If McCarthy was a little bit more of a pocket passer, wasn't so mobile and moving around, which was the polar opposite really of what you got out of the Auburn game outside of a few designed runs for the quarterback, I think Braswell would have had much more opportunity to shine in that one. He wasn't on the field for a lot of the run plays. In fact, Michigan's first scoring drive was almost all Blake Corum, and Braswell wasn't on the field at all. So there wasn't a lot to go on as far as whether or not he was better in the run game than what I saw against Auburn, just because, again, he really didn't have the opportunity against the run that he did against Auburn. Then finally, the Georgia game, a little better the few times he was on the field for a running play compared to the Auburn game, but he still seemed a little bit hesitant. It's almost as if he's trying to process what he's seeing before he makes his move. So those run defense instincts need to be developed, and they need to be developed quickly. He needs to stop thinking so much and just react and go make a play, because we know he can. It's just a matter of see, react, not see, process, then react. There was one play that was it was absolutely atrocious. And I don't really blame Braswell for this. There was an audible by Georgia, and somehow the adjustment made by Alabama's defense caused Braswell to move out to the slot where he was in man coverage. And he just got absolutely cooked by Lovett. And that play resulted in a first down. It was ugly, but there's no reason that an edge rusher should be in the slot against a speed receiver. So that's not entirely on Braswell, but it was hard to watch at the time. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Braswell, when he has to go out, cover the flat, maybe cover a running back or a tight end, he did relatively well. You put him man on man against a slot receiver, I mean, that's a mismatch no matter who it is. It could have been any linebacker you name. If they're lining up opposite of Chris Godwin's winning that rep. But the run defense just has to get better. When I watch Braswell, I can see what the Bucs saw in him, but I can also see why he wasn't talked about with the Dallas Turners and the Leatu Latus and the Jared Verses of the world leading up to the draft. He's a rotational guy that will likely start the year working his way onto the field on third downs and passing situations, really like he did with Alabama. The nice thing is he can come in for multiple players. While you'd like to see the Bucs go with Braswell, Diaby combos on third downs, this is a player that can come in for Logan Hall, and he can put his hand in the dirt along with Diaby and Gregory, or Diaby and Tryon Shoyinka as the edge rushers. He can come in with Diaby and Gregory at the edges in place of KJ Britt or Servassier Dennis as the other inside linebacker and blitz, kind of the way we saw Devin White do for all those years, and really be a huge factor that way. He can get bounced all over the field and still use that speed to get to the quarterback, and that's exactly what the Buccaneers need him to do. Bowles and then Jason Light, of course, have set this team up to have a heavy rotation on the defense as far as the defensive line and the edge rushers are concerned. And there's a lot of pieces that can be swapped out for one another that are not necessarily position dependent. And what I mean by that is I mentioned all the people that Braswell can come in for. I've mentioned time and time again how Todd Bowles called Joe Tryon Shoyinka one of his chess pieces. JTS is another one of those guys. He can be on the edge. He can get his hand in the dirt. He can line up an inside linebacker. He can line up all over the place. And when you have Braswell joining Yaya Diaby, Randy Gregory, Tryon Shoyinka, and then Watts and Jose Ramirez and Anthony Nelson, there's going to be a lot of players jumping in and out during drives for this defense. And that means there's going to be a lot of fresh legs late in games when that pass rush is really needed the most. Overall, I think Braswell is a really, really good addition for this Bucs team, but I got to see some real dedication to improving that run defense. If you play for Todd Bowles, you have to be able to step up and stop the run. That is definitely something that Braswell is struggling with coming out of college, but I think he has the ability. He has all of the intangibles. It's about getting him to trust his instincts and not think so much, simply just react. And that's much easier said than done. It's something that's going to really have to be coached into Braswell during OTAs, during training camp, during preseason, and then throughout the season, which is why I really believe he's going to be a third down guy, obvious passing situation guy, rotational guy to start. And then maybe as you get later into the season, you start to see what I did in a lot of these Alabama games. First half, third down guy, passing situation guy. Into the second half, rarely came off the field. He continues to get better as the game goes on, and that's something that the Buccaneers are certainly going to take advantage of this season. Some predictions for the Buccaneers schedule. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, parlays, and much. more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at minus 140, followed by the defending champion Denver Nuggets at plus 360, and the team that they are facing off against right now in what's probably the best series in the NBA playoffs, the Minnesota Timberwolves, third in line at plus 800. In the race for Lord Stanley's Cup, the greatest trophy in all of sports, the Florida Panthers are the favorites at plus 250, followed by the Dallas Stars at plus 310, then the red-hot New York Rangers at plus 380. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping things up here on a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and the schedule release will be tomorrow. For those of you listening to this when it drops, it is Wednesday. The schedule is going to drop Wednesday night. I will be going live on YouTube around 8:30 or 9 o'clock is the goal to talk about the schedule release. So make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, notifications turned on so that you can join me when I go live. But wanted to give a few predictions before the schedule drop just to see how wrong I am. David and I would do this every year. It was a lot of fun. Every once in a while we would hit. I'm not going to predict the entire 17-game schedule, but I am going to touch on a few things. So let's start with who the Buccaneers' opponents are for the year so you kind of know what's on the docket. At home, the Buccaneers will, of course, face the Falcons, Saints, and Panthers. Then they will host the Eagles, Commanders, Broncos, Sean Payton, gross, the Raiders, the 49ers, and the Ravens. On the road, the Bucs will travel to face the Cowboys, Giants, Chiefs, Chargers, Lions, then, of course, the Falcons, Saints, and Panthers. So let's have some predictions here. I am going to say that the Buccaneers will get 3 primetime games this year. They are going to have a Monday night game against the Philadelphia Eagles. They are going to have a Sunday night game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And they are going to have a Thursday night game against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. Going to double down on that one. Not only am I predicting the opponent, I'm predicting the location on that one when I have 2 to choose from. So 3 primetime games, 2 of them on the road. And of course, playing the Eagles and Chiefs has more to do with the primetime slot than it does with the NFL having any kind of reverence for the Buccaneers. Another prediction, week 1, the Buccaneers are going to go on the road and take on the New York Giants. So right out of the gate, looking at 1-0 as the defense is going to absolutely dismantle Daniel Jones, which is going to be hilarious to watch. Actually talked a little bit about Daniel Jones on yesterday's episode. Shout out David Harrison, who was in the live chat, and he agreed with me wholeheartedly, which for you longtime listeners know, not something David did often. A lot of times we did not agree, but that's what made it fun. The creamsicle game, while it hasn't been officially announced, if the Buccaneers do in fact have a creamsicle game, it will be when they host the New Orleans Saints. Just to remind them of who the first team the Buccaneers ever beat in the history of the franchise while wearing those uniforms. I think last year I nailed the creamsicle game. I picked the Lions for that one. No old school NFC Central divisional matchups at home this year. So to me, yeah, it seemed like it would line up with the divisional rivalry. I do remember the Bucs wearing their creamsicles against the Saints when Vincent Jackson had like a 97-yard reception that didn't go for a touchdown. Bucs ended up losing that game because, of course, they did. The pewter game, which a lot of fans look forward to much more than the creamsicle game, I think it's going to be against the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't know why. I have no logical explanation as to why. There's no underlying story. There's no reasoning, but I mean, there was really no reason for it to be against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis last year when they wore their pewter uniforms. So why not? Let's go with the Chargers. I will say no Thanksgiving game, no Christmas game for the Buccaneers. I'll throw that in with my predictions. And at one point, the Bucs are going to end up having to play 3 straight road games because it seems to happen way more often than it should to the Bucs. And then my final prediction for the schedule, Tom Brady will call 1 Buccaneers game for Fox, since they will end up in the coveted America's Game of the Week slot against, drumroll, San Francisco 49ers. So Tom Brady will return to Ray J to do that game, surely to a warm welcome from all of the Buccaneers fans who will see him there. Who knows? Might be doing Ring of Honor at halftime for that one. They haven't announced a Ring of Honor. They haven't announced if they're even going to do Ring of Honor this year, but it wouldn't surprise me if Brady was the next one in. Do I think he should be? Probably not. I think there's a couple of past legends that need to be inducted and honored in that ring before Brady, but that's neither here nor there. Tom Brady comes in, wins a Super Bowl, really turns around the state of the franchise, and the Bucs haven't missed the playoffs since signing Tom Brady. So drop your schedule predictions in the comments. Be sure to come back tomorrow when I believe we will have the newly married Evan Klosky joining us. We're going to get his thoughts on the Antoine Winfield Jr. deal. I'll get his predictions on the schedule. Maybe talk about what he thinks now a Tristan Wirfs deal is going to look like. They got Antoine taken care of. Now the focus shifts over to Tristan. No deadline for that one, but I'm sure the Bucs would like to have him locked up before the season starts. But until then, please check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.